I'm Meredith O'Donnell.
And I'm David Sigmund. Today we're going to be talking about the ESRB, which is the review system that you see on video games. We're also going to be talking about some various video game news. Tonight we're shooting out on the parking lot of the Agents of Comics and Gamer Zone building on a beautiful Final Friday night. For those of you who aren't from the area or haven't heard from Final Friday, that's where everybody gets together, walks around, checks out all the art galleries and the interesting happenings down in the Delano district. Now for our segment on the ESRB. Now most of you have probably seen little symbols on the edges of game boxes that say T for teen, AO, various different acronyms. We're going to actually explain a little bit about them because they're a little bit more in depth than you might expect. And the other thing about it is most people don't really know or understand how they work. Well, I'm going to also give a little background first. The ESRB was actually created in 1994. Part of what happened was the big controversy over Mortal Kombat's fatality system, where you could pull the heads off people and pull their spines out, blood, guts, and gore everywhere. This was the line where people started realizing that maybe not everything's appropriate for everyone. The ESRB was created by the Entertainment Software Association, which is basically all the publishers kind of get together and create a self-governing body that says, hey, these are the rules we're going to live by. This system is used by 350 different publishers currently, and there's always more added. Publishers don't have to use the ESRB. There's no law on the books currently that says they have to, though there is one that's in the works right now. But the truth is, unless you're using the ESRB content guides, you're not going to see your game on shelves at Walmart or anywhere else besides as a download-only game. And there's a reason for that. Not only do parents get to use this as an opportunity to figure out what games are appropriate for the kids and what games aren't, it's also what the retailers use to decide what they think is appropriate in their stores too. That makes it a very important and a very powerful item to know about. And we're going to start off with what do each one of these symbols mean. Their first one, early childhood, EC. Simply put, an EC rated title should be suitable for any child over 3.
These would be something like the Reader Rabbits or the Einstein games.
Yeah, exactly.
That are for the babies.
Titles that are rated E are should be available and accessible to anybody above the age of 6. Most of these games won't have anything offensive in them, though keep in mind the term offensive, religious content is offensive to some people, and this is only defining certain attributes like alcohol use, blood, guts, gore. So just because it's rated this way doesn't mean that parents don't necessarily need to take a look at the game. E10 plus. With that, anybody 10 years or older should be able to play this game. These sort of titles may start getting into the point where they're containing fantasy violence, cartoon violence, things like this. At this point, you're starting to see games where you might even start seeing some animated blood. T for teen. This is the largest category because teens are the biggest consumer of video games. Teen, in this case, is rated anybody 13 years or older. At this point, you might start actually seeing more than just mild violence. You might start seeing heavy violence. You might start seeing blood. Though keep in mind, when we get to the content descriptors, we're going to explain the difference between the different levels of blood. Crude humor, nothing that you wouldn't already see on TV. Mature rated titles are actually where there's the largest, one might say the largest problem with video games right now. Great example. Halo is rated M for mature. Except for, I know for a fact, a lot of parents have bought Halo for their kids. This is where parental discretion becomes important. This is a mature title. It's considered to be appropriate for anybody 17 years or older. Well, I know a lot of parents that have no problem with their kids playing Halo. You've seen Halo, right?
I've seen Halo.
There's really not, it's not heavy violence as in blood, guts, and gore. There's not stuff splattering all over the walls. So I can understand why some parents look at it and go, it's appropriate for our kids. Again, these are guidelines, and you still have to make the decision yourself based off of each one. Adults only. This is definitely for adults only. A person's 18 years or older. Most of the titles that have been titled adults only have not been because of violence, blood, guts, or gore. It's been because of sexual content, nudity, things like that. Of course, recently there was the hot coffee mod for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where this unlocks a whole scene where people can have, well, simulated sex. This caused a big row because this title was actually labeled as being M for mature. Mm-hmm. This content did ship with the game. Now, it did require a third-party product to unlock it. But it was in there, it shipped with it, so when the ESRB got a hold of this, they felt that this was inappropriate and retitled it after it shipped. It's now listed as an adults-only game. There's one more rating, and that's essentially an unrated game. RP, rating pending. Typically, you will never see a game on the shelf with RP on it. In fact, instead, what you'll see that is in advertising. That's part of something else that I haven't mentioned yet. Even advertisements that go out that have a rating on them.
I'm not sure any games have been put out with RP, actually sold with RP.
I don't think there has been either. I'm not positive, but I don't think there has been.
We've done this with videos, but we haven't done them with games.
The second part to the ESRB rating system is called the descriptors. What these are a further description of what's in a title. For instance, instead of just saying it's T for teen, it says it's T for teen plus contains animated blood, violence, adult themes, things like this. Those allow you to more fine-grained understand what's happening in this title. Now, some of the descriptors, for instance, have multiple versions of the same one. For instance, violence. There's cartoon violence. There's We're going to go over those real quick here.
To start with, we're gonna start talking about the blood. Now, there's just blood, which is depictions of blood. That's all that means. Now, there are two other descriptors. One is animated blood. Animated blood means it's discolored blood. It's unrealistic depictions of blood. It's cartoony. Then you get into blood and gore, which is mutilated body parts. It's a little more graphic. Not something you're going to see on E for Everyone.
Violence is also the same way. There's cartoon violence. Basically, non-human looking characters go about it. It may be quite possible that when you're done with the violent scene, that one of the character that was hurt, damaged, or killed gets back up and is unharmed.
Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner.
Exactly. There's fantasy violence. Basically, non-human characters. They're set in a setting that typically doesn't feel completely realistic. Then there's one that's just violence, which basically says indications of aggressive conflict. For instance, two teams going at it with guns. Now keep in mind, when I say violence, that doesn't cover the blood and gore portion of it. That's what those descriptors are for. You can have violence without the blood and the gore. Intense violence. This gets serious at it. This is pretty much reserved for some really, really heavy-duty stuff that most people won't see written on a title anyways. Mild violence. Scenes that depict violence but are not very intense at all.
Now you also have references to alcohol, references to tobacco, and references to drugs. That means that there are images of this. It doesn't necessarily mean they're being used. They're just in the scene. They're actually covered under a different title if they're being used.
For use, you have use of alcohol, use of tobacco, and use of, when they say drugs, they're referring to very specifically illegal drugs like marijuana, cocaine, things like this that break a lot of rules. You wouldn't normally see this sort of use on TV. You might see references on TV, but you would never see this sort of use on TV for drugs.
Now, most of the descriptors that we have been referencing to so far have been for those kids who play games on their own. It's really for the 10-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and up to adult. Now, the next couple that we're going to talk about are really for the little kids. These are the games and the different kind of titles that parents will do with the children and with very young toddlers. The first one is some adult assistance may be needed. This is intended for the very young ages. These are really for the toddler games. The next one is called edutainment. This is for it provides skills. It provides entertainment that actually educates the child. It has a little more of a learning process to it. The last one is informational. This is basically content that contains data or facts, resources, information, things like that.
I'm going to lump a couple of categories together this time. Cartoon mischief. Basically, think, again, Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, these sort of things. It doesn't just cover the violence level of it, it also covers what's happening in it, the jokes, the things like this. Crude humor, stuff you'd pretty much see on TV. Ren and Stimpy, any of those would cover as crude humor. But there's also lyrics is a great example. Well, let's face it, some of the stuff that you hear on the radio, there's some strong language in it. Lyrics covers that there's some songs here that have some strong content.
And
strong lyrics.
Basically, if it's in the background, it's going to be listed.
Oh yes, oh yes. Strong lyrics, well, let's face it, there's some gangster rap and some of that stuff that have some seriously twisted lyrics involved that they may end up in a game, and they made a content descriptor for it. I don't think I've ever actually seen one listed with strong lyrics, but they've got it there just in case they need it. Language, as in the use of cursing, things like that. The language one actually means mild to moderate use. Strong language means heavy-duty use, F-bombs used all over the place, things like that.
There are two different descriptors for gambling. There's real gambling, which is you can lose money. You're putting up money for this game, and you could lose it. You could also win it. There's also simulated gaming. This is basically games that you can play that are against other players, but you're not going to lose any money. There may be points involved. You can win, you can lose, but you're not actually going to lose anything out of your pocket.
The last part involves all the sexuality possibilities for game content. For instance, nudity, partial nudity. Well, partial nudity might be a topless character. Nudity means, well, basically full frontal nudity, that sort of thing. Sexual themes. Sexual themes actually can be a little bit ambiguous. It doesn't necessarily mean there's sex involved in the game. It just means that there could be some themes that are a little more mature than most of the kids need to be involved with. Strong sexual content. If it says strong sexual content, usually means there's out and out sex involved in the game. Sexual violence. At this point, you're looking at, well, violent depictions of sex, rape, things like this that are extremely not appropriate for kids. There's actually one more descriptor left to cover, and that is online play. Every game that allows for online play does have a notice that says online gameplay experience may differ. In that case, one of the reasons why they said is some games allow for modding, basically the changing of content for players to adjust things, add new skins, new models, things like this. There's nothing that prevents a player from coming up with something crude and sexual or extremely violent that falls completely outside of these descriptors, or that may allow for online chat. When that happens, well, anything goes. You can see the entire list of descriptors at ESRB.org. That's all we're going to talk about today with the ESRB. Hope this helped to educate you a little bit more about it.
Forget punching monkeys. Forget boring banner ads. Forget pop-up windows. Your customers have already forgotten. Let Midnight Rider Productions move you into the future of internet advertising. We provide placement in our existing product lineup for advertisements, production services for online video advertising, and for cable and television advertising. Don't let your customers forget you. Remember Midnight Rider Productions. And welcome back to the World of Gamer Zone.
One of the things you might not realize is that World of Gamer Zone is actually shot down at Gamer Zone Centers. It's at 817 West Douglas on the second story, right above Agents of Comics. It's open from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 4 a.m. every night. And if you're kind of wondering what exactly is Gamer Zone, it's a gaming center where people come in, sit down, and they play video games. Obviously, the hosts of the show play plenty of video games, partially because we're involved in Gamer Zone. So if you have a hankering to play some games, well, we're open pretty dang late, so come on and check it out. And now we move on to some game news. Kuma War has released its 75th episode. Now, you probably haven't heard of Kuma War. Kuma War has a bit of an interesting premise. They've taken items that have occurred during the war in Iraq and have adapted them to video games. One could view this as kind of a strange form of news reporting. For instance, the bombing of
Zarqawi. Al-Zarqawi.
Al-Zarqawi. Thank God she can say it. Was the module they just released. They also put news clips in it and things like this. This gives the player the opportunity to play through parts of the war in first-person or third-person perspective. This mirroring of real-life events to video game events isn't necessarily new. There's been historical games before, but these are things like Civil War games. These are games that have taken place in very distant past that have been well documented already.
This game, they try and say it's news. They try and say it's another way to bring the news. But as far as I can tell, this is a war game, and the theme is the latest military action. And that's really all it is. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that this is news, because they're not really telling the news. They're only telling military action and letting you go through what the military action was.
But do you think there's any validity to somebody being able to experience what it was these soldiers were experiencing? Granted, you're only experiencing it through a first-person shooter game. I mean, it's not like you're actually...
I don't think you are experiencing what they're experiencing, because there's so many more sides to it than, you know, the bullet that comes out of a gun or the bomb that comes out of a plane. Those are things, but there's a whole feeling, there's a whole, you know, emotional response that you're never going to get through the way that they're putting this together.
Well, I can agree with that, but I do have to wonder if it could be used as a news reporting tool. I can see more validity in a lot of the historical games in a lot of ways, even both in the reenacting what occurred and the possibilities of, hey, you know, what could have been happened differently? How could have, for instance, World War II has been covered so many times. How many different ways could the same battles have been fought? Could somebody have done better than Patton at some of these things?
Right, but a line isn't crossed there. They're not trying to say, I'm going to tell you history by you playing this game. You're going to know the history. It's really, those are theme-based games. They're war games based on a theme that happened in history. But that's not where you're going to learn it. You're going to learn that in school. You're going to learn that somewhere else. They're not trying to give you news and play it off as, you know, you have the whole story if you look at this, which is almost the way that they're coming across with this Kuma War. Now, there are games out there that actually do have an educational purpose. They do bring out, you know, a humane side, or the whole goal is to kind of seek peace.
Right.
And that's our next news article.
As a matter of fact, it is. Games for Change just had their conference here the 27th of June. This highlighted a number of games that were designed to bring about essentially social change or social understanding. Some of them good, some of them bad. And we're going to actually discuss a couple of them real quick. Peacemaker was one of the we took a look at. Peacemaker's not actually out yet. Peacemaker is a simulation of the Israeli/Palestinian conflict. You basically get to be one side or the other. Your job is to run your country to a point that you get to a point of peace and stability. Now, oddly enough, peace and stability can be obtained through military action, through political means, through discussions, through some sorts of social change.
Basically, you're going to be the Palestinian leader or the Israeli leader. You're going to run your term, and you're going to have, I think they even use some real life news that's come through, and you'll have to decide, how are you going to diplomatically handle these situations? What are you going to do to bring about peace?
I gotta admit, this is a huge change, though, from what normal games are after, because normal games, peace is not an option unless it's at the end of a gun. Peace usually means that you've overcome and conquered your foe. This time, these mean that you're supposed to come together with...
It's very thoughtful. It's
yes.
very, you've really got to use all senses. It's not just about, pointing a gun, like you said.
Exactly. Pax Warrior by 23 Yanzi also runs along the same vein. You're playing a UN warrior,
Commander.
A UN commander whose job it is to bring peace and stability to the Rwanda region. It basically boils down to, once again, a matter of choices. What choices and things can you sway and change to help make a situation get better? Scrolling down here. Cyber Cops by Livewire Design is kind of interesting. Well, the first couple of them we talked about are on a much larger scale.
World events, really.
Exactly. Cyber Cops is on a single person scale. Basically, this is for teens and kids. Their job in this game is to investigate crimes. Be it...
in fact, these are actually going to be released in May in schools, next May in schools, to help with the teaching. It's a teaching tool. So
yeah, I mean, it's more than just your standard game fare again. And the goal here is to help educate kids by solving these crimes, to educate them on the process of crime, so that they can see, for instance, when somebody approaches them with money for something, well, they kind of see where this might be leading to, how drugs can affect the situation, how all of these things can affect the situation. And it's going to be, and even though we're it'll be released, as she said, in May, but it's also going to be in the United States, Britain, Canada, and Australia. Disaffected was one that was listed there, and honestly,
I don't know how it got in, really. Yeah. It's a little strange.
Disaffected, it's listed as a video game parody of a Kinko's copy store. Basically, you get to play the FedEx Kinko copy guys and pretend like, you're serving customers.
It's almost like you're the manager having to deal with your employees, your disgruntled
employees,
lazy, don't want to do anything, not very smart employees.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of this is, we actually sat down and played this for a little bit, and we both walked away from it going, why would this have been represented at the conference?
It was depressing to play. It was, to think, it was almost saying that if you're a manager in these places, these are the kind of people that you're going to have to hire, and it was really depressing.
And honestly, because you get to play as part of a team. Note how I team, because honestly, your coworkers do nothing for the most part. They don't answer the questions of
well, wasn't there a part in there where you were directing one of the employees, and he pops up with a little window that says, "I don't feel like working today."
Yeah.
And he just stops.
I mean, I was like, oh my goodness, why? What? Okay. And the part I have a problem with it is one, it's kind of like it's trying to convince people that a regular job's a bad idea. Well, everybody's at some time or another had a regular job. I've cooked chicken. You've our director.
We've all had
exactly.
jobs like that.
It's not a bad thing. And it seems to trying to be indicating, one, that this is a bad thing, in my opinion. And two,
what are you learning?
Yeah, you're not learning anything. And you're definitely not learning one of the key things to a job like this, which is teamwork. Hey, if you all work together, you'll have, most of the jobs I've had, it didn't matter how bad the job was, you're going to have some fun at it. There was a sense of teamwork, a sense of camaraderie, and this game eliminates every last possible sense of that.
A game that I've played on gamehouse.com is called Diner Dash, and it is basically you're a waitress. You're a waitress that has to go through, seat people, you have to take their order, you have to go turn it in, you have to give them their order, you have to clean up the table, before you can seat the next person. And that to me was more like a real job, and your customers would be happy or sad based on how you did your job. That seemed a little more realistic to me.
Actually, and she pulled it up for me so I could see it and play it a little bit. And the difference is, I thought that game was at least fun.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with the game trying to educate. I don't have a problem with the game trying to do any of these things that these games do. It's just don't try and package what is essentially a puzzle game as a world-changing game or as a life educational game, and also not have it be fun. And the last one we're going to cover is called Earthquake in Zipland. Earthquake in Zipland was developed by some psychologists. It has an interesting premise. It actually is designed to deal with divorce. The concepts that it builds up a kingdom.
It's for children separated.
Yeah.
Who are in separated or divorced families.
Yep. She describes it much better than me in that part. The premise is that the king and queen of a kingdom, this kingdom is held together by a big zipper, that's Zipland, and the zipper has come undone. And the players that the kids play goes out on a quest to repair the zipper. What it actually ends up teaching them is that you need to, it teaches them the skills to cope with divorce. It teaches them the skills to understand, to deal with the anger. This is a great concept. I mean, there are so many kids that have to deal with divorce in their life. My parents never got divorced, but I know a number of people, my wife's parents have gotten divorced. And it has a startling effect. Any tools like this can be created to help that situation. That's wonderful. It's marvelous. I don't know, I can't quantify to say, hey, this is great. It does work. I don't know. But, if you're going through that sort of situation, it might be something to look into when you talk to a psychologist about this situation with your children, whether this game might help out.
I would definitely say it's a game for change.
And that's a wrap for our show today. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. Keep in mind, if you have any questions about stuff, hit the World of Gamerzone website at worldofgamerzone.com. And see you next time.
Thanks for watching.